Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the best-selling Mario Kart game and best-selling Nintendo Switch game of all time. So you'd think with the amount of sales it's gotten, which is over 62 million, it would have some pretty high-quality content in it. Well, today, I'm going to be taking a look at every single retro track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and ranking it on a scale of 1 to 10 to see if these remakes are true and faithful remakes to the original counterparts. Let's dive right in. So starting off with the 0 out of 10s, Mario Circuit 3 from Super Mario Kart. We've been here once. We didn't need to do it again, and yet Nintendo felt the reason to bring back this absolutely boring track. It's flat, the graphics are terrible, and we're going to see that theme a lot with the rest of the booster course tracks. And we all know that they didn't do a very good job of making those graphics as good as they should have been. So I think deservedly so, Mario Circuit 3 is just a boring track, and that's why it gets a 0 out of 10. Moving up 1 point, we have the 1 out of 10s, and the only track here is 3DS Toad Circuit. Very similar to Mario Circuit 3, the graphics are just awful, and it's a flat track. It's the exact same it is in the 3DS, and the graphics, I would say, are worse than they were in the 3DS. The grass looks like it just came out of the toilet, and everything else just looks so plastic-y, if that's a word, if I'm saying that right. So I think deservedly so, again, Toad Circuit is just another boring, uninteresting, and bland track that Nintendo did not do a very good job of recreating, and that's why it gets a 1 out of 10. Moving up again, we have the 2 out of 10s, and there's only one track here as well, GBA Sky Garden. For whatever reason, Nintendo just felt like, yeah, we're going to change the entire track layout. It is totally different from the original Super Circuit track, and they changed a little bit too much to make it feel like it is a good track. And once again, the booster course graphics don't do this track any justice whatsoever. They added a couple weird shortcuts in places that I guess make the track a little bit more playable and a little bit more fun if you're in the middle of the pack and you need to get ahead. But other than that, again, it's a boring track to look at, and they changed pretty much the entire layout of it, so that's why it gets a 2 out of 10. At least it's a more interesting track than the bottom two. Moving up to 3 out of 10, this is our final tier with only one track in it, and it's Koopa Cape. And I hate to put a Wii track down here because the Wii tracks are so iconic and they were so well designed, but they just kind of messed up with it in the Booster Course Pass. They already remade it in Mario Kart 7, the previous installment, and it was pretty good. The only thing I didn't like about it was that they made the underwater section a half pipe, which I felt was unnecessary. For some reason, it just got so much worse moving into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. They changed the music in different sections besides the underwater section, which makes no sense to do, was fine as is. And once again, Booster Course graphics are not doing this track any justice whatsoever. So that's why Koopa Cape is just down here at the bottom of the barrel. At least it's a more fun track than the previous ones that are below it, but it's still a 3 out of 10 for just being lackluster in so many ways. Now come the 4 out of 10s, and first we have Shroom Ridge. Now, you might be saying, Bag, why is Shroom Ridge above Koopa Cape? Koopa Cape is a much more interesting track. I would disagree in terms of the quality of it in the Booster Course Pass. Shroom Ridge, I think, definitely nails the traffic aspect very well. I think Nintendo did a good job of capturing that compared to the original. And the shortcut that's in the middle of Grassy Path is much more obvious, and I like the glider ramp. Even though it's not necessary, it feels very cool. If you have a mushroom, you can go off that glider ramp and kind of glide through a little bit of the tunnel, which I think is a very fun part of this track. Again, however, the graphics are not doing this track any justice whatsoever, like I've said multiple times. That's why this one is only getting a 4 out of 10. Next in this tier, we have Calamari Desert. And the reason it's down here is solely because of the fact that it has an alternate path lap 3. I think what Nintendo was going for was recreating the Mario Kart Tour field, but it was totally unnecessary. I remember when Calamari Desert 2 first came out in Mario Kart Tour, and I was very confused as to why there was a second one. I didn't remember it being in Mario Kart 64, but then I found out that, oh, it's just the same track except I'm driving on the train tracks now. I think it's a very unoriginal attempt to make the track more interesting, and I think that's where it falls flat, and transferring it over into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, again, didn't serve it well at all. The final track in this tier is Rock Mountain, and really the only thing that is holding this back so much are the graphics. In the 3DS version of this track, it looked so good. I loved the gray mountains and the green grass tops. It made the track feel much more realistic, but coming over into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, they decided to replace it with the boring plastic brown mountains, and it doesn't make the track look good at all. There's a lot of clashing themes in this track in terms of the graphical quality. Obviously, we have the high-res models of all the characters, and then the iron bridge as well, but everything else just feels so much more plastic that all the racers feel out of place in it. And again, it's just pretty straightforward compared to the original. They didn't change anything about it. If the graphics were much better, I think this track would be in a much better spot on this tier list. We're now entering the higher tiers, but first we have to get past the middle of the road stuff that lies in 5 out of 10. This stuff is the tracks that aren't amazing, but they're also not complete garbage, and I think the tracks that I have in this tier list pretty much fit that criteria. We're going to start things off with Peach Gardens, and for the same reasons that Calamari Desert is ranked this low, Peach Gardens also has a weird reverse section that takes you back through the track on a weird alternate path that is, again, very unnecessary to the quality of this track. This is a wonderful DS track that they recreated in Mario Kart Wii, and it felt very great in that game, but coming over into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, they decided to shake it up with another Mario Kart Tour feature that was not really accounted for, I guess. Again, it just feels like another attempt to make a retro track feel more interesting, and I think they once again missed the mark on this one. Even though the rest of Peach Gardens is very fine, this one aspect of it really just holds it back from the rest, and again, booster course graphics are not doing it any favors. Next up is Choco Mountain. It's a very straightforward track with a couple hills here and there, but it's not a very interesting remake compared to some of the other ones we'll see, and it's not very interesting compared to its N64 counterpart. I think this would be higher up in the tiers, maybe like a 7, possibly, if the graphics were better. Again, booster course graphics not doing any of these tracks any favors. You'll hear me say this multiple times throughout this video. But it's true, sadly, that the booster course graphics didn't really help out any of these retro tracks meet a high standard. Next, we have 3DS Rosalina's Ice World. It's just an okay track, I'd say. You know, pretty middle of the road. That's why it's sitting here 5 out of 10. I don't think there's anything too crazy about it. It works and plays just the same as it did in Mario Kart 7, and it looks just as bad as it does in Tour. So, I mean, nothing really too crazy about it. It's just an okay track. Next up is Maple Treeway. It's also here in this middle of the road area just because it's the Tour version of the track. And I didn't really enjoy the Tour version of the track. I think they expanded parts of the track that didn't need to be, and they made parts of it a little bit too easy. And now I think that was some of the charm of the Mario Kart Wii tracks, is that they were more challenging tracks. And the fact that they kind of just made the track wider in some spots for no reason really just takes away from the challenging and more skilled aspect that this track had in Mario Kart Wii. And I think that's where it's definitely missing. And again, booster course graphics, not that good. Mushroom Gorge is also in this tier for pretty much the same reasons as Maple Treeway, is that it's much easier to play on than it was in Wii, and booster course graphics not doing it any favors. So let's just move on. Coming up next is our first base game track for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Retros, and it's Royal Raceway. Really, the only reason it's down here is just because it's a pretty straightforward raceway track. I don't think I could rate this any higher, maybe like a 6. It looks really, really good in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but it's just flat roads for pretty much the whole thing, and that's what it was in Mario Kart 64, so there's no reason to change that or rate it any higher, I don't think, and that's where Royal Raceway stands. The last one in the 5 out of 10s tier is Coconut Mall. It just looks awful. I don't know what to say besides that. I think if we were rating these based purely on graphics, this would be probably down in the 0 to 2 range in terms of how it looks. But it's just another iconic Mario Kart track, and the track is pretty much faithful to the original, and it's pretty faithful in Mario Kart 7 too. But the only problem is that they just carried over all the tour aspects of the track and left all the Mario Kart Wii aspects of it out. Like, they just kicked them out the door. You know, the balloon hanging over the fountain? Gone. The fun escalators, like they had the stairs and the divisions in them, really cool, gone. It's just a boring conveyor belt. I just really think Nintendo missed the mark on this remake, especially because it's one of the first tracks in Booster Course Pass. They really needed to bring it on strong, and they really didn't do that. The cars also aren't the way they were in Wii, where they moved back and forth. They now just spin, and it's weird. And they also were just stationary in the first patch of the Booster Course before they were like, oh yeah, we need to change that. It's just a lackluster recreation of Coconut Mall, but it's Coconut Mall, and that's why it's in the middle of the road. Coming up next is the 6 out of 10 tracks, and we're going to start this off with Yoshi Valley. I think for the same reasons Royal Raceway got a 5 out of 10, Yoshi Valley is pretty much the exact same as it is as the N64. The graphics look great because it's a Nintendo Switch. The only really cool thing is that, you know, it's a glider path where the cannon is now, so it allows you for a little bit more freedom to adjust your trajectory, which I think is fun, and the shortcut was made much more easier to do. I think for those reasons, it just deserves a 6 out of 10. Nothing else really to rate it than that. Next is Moonview Highway, and it's here in this tier mainly because of just the graphics. Again, they aren't phenomenal. It looks better, I think, once they got towards the back half of the booster course, they really started to realize, oh, we need to make the graphics look a little bit better. So some of the later cups of the booster course look really good compared to the first few. But Moonview Highway, you know, it's just pretty basic in terms of its recreation. Really glad to see it back. The only thing I don't really like is just kind of like the cars. The cars feel very plastic compared to... Hey, so future bag here. I don't know what I was yapping about with Moonview Highway. Looking at it now, it definitely is much better than a 6 out of 10. Probably somewhere around an 8 out of 10, I think, is where I'd put this track, actually. I just kind of forgot what the track looked like in the Booster Course Pass, but after going through some footage for the track, it definitely looks much better than a 6 out of 10. So I would just move this guy to 8 out of 10 on the tier list, and we're just going to cut to the next track. Back to Past Bag. Next is Baby Park. Really, all this does to improve on it is they tilt it, make the whole thing anti-gravity to make it a little bit more chaotic than it was in Mario Kart Double Dash, but other than that, Baby Park is just kind of here. Riverside Park is our next 6 out of 10 track. I think for pretty good reasons. It looks good. They really did some fun changes to make this track stand out from its original counterpart, but nothing too crazy. It still plays very much similar as it did in Super Circuit, besides kind of just like that mountain that's right at the end of the track. And that's really all Riverside Park has going for it, and that's why it's sitting in this tier. Sunset Wilds is next, and for very similar reasons to Riverside Park, they just improved on a lot of the boring aspects from the GBA version, and they did that with a lot of the GBA tracks that are in this game, but Sunset Wilds is a little bit more boring compared to some of the later ones we'll see. The only really thing that makes it stand out is kind of the mud and how it slows you down a little bit differently the way Off-Road does, and I think it's a really unique mechanic compared to some of the other things we've seen. Next is DS Mario Circuit. I've wanted this one to come back for a very long time. The music is a lot of fun. I love it, and they really nailed it in the Mario Kart 8 version of this track. But again, this one is in the Booster Course Pass, and we all know what happens in the Booster Course Pass. The tracks look pretty lackluster, and the same thing goes for this track as well. While it's not as bad as some of the earlier cups, it still looks mediocre compared to the base game, but it's still a really fun track to play, and I think they did a very good job of recreating it in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. For very similar reasons, Daisy Cruiser is down here just like Mario Circuit. It's kind of hard to rank these middle-of-the-road tracks because it's just like, yeah, they're good. I don't really have anything else to say about them. And that's really all I have to say about Daisy Cruiser. You know, it's a faithful remake of the original. Nothing too crazy in terms of graphics or what they changed about it. And I think that's just why it's down here. Now, this might come as a shocker, but the last track in our 6 out of 10 tier is 3DS Rainbow Road. Graphics, graphics, graphics. I'll say it over and over again. The Booster Cars graphics really didn't shine on this one. Yes, the Rainbow Road itself looks really good, but I think a lot of the planets, they just match how they did in Mario Kart Tour, and it didn't add to the experience that is 3DS Rainbow Road. It is so much fun to play in Mario Kart 7, and even in Mario Kart Wii, where they made their own like custom track version of it for CTGP. It looks great in Mario Kart Wii, looks great in Mario Kart 7, and then they just missed it going into Mario Kart 8. Like, whatever the transfer was between 7 and 8, it really was just not it. I think they just missed a lot of aspects that was a part of the unique charm of the track in Mario Kart 7, and that's why it's down here in 6 out of 10. They just missed the mark. We're approaching the high tiers, but before we get there, we have our final middle of the road tier to get through, 7 out of 10. We're going to kick it off with GBA Mario Circuit. Now, this Mario Circuit, I think, is one of the most fun I've played on besides the Mario Kart 8 one, because it's just so creative, especially compared to the original Mario Circuit. Again, they didn't have much to work with on the Game Boy Advance, so a lot of the tracks were just flat, and I love that they said, yeah, we're going to make this one part of the track go up in anti-gravity, and it's going to be really fun. And I think that is what makes this track shine the most, and that's why it's up here, really, is because of the unique change that they did to it. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward circuit. You drive on flat ground, you take a couple of turns, there's oil spills on the ground, and that's really it. There's nothing too special about it besides the revamped first few turns, and that's why it's chilling in 7 out of 10, I think. Next is Cheap Cheap Beach, and this looks stunning in Mario Kart 8. Obviously, the DS version of this was really fun. One of the better tracks in Mario Kart DS, I'd say, but I think they really nailed it coming into Mario Kart 8 because water looks so much better on the Nintendo Switch, and I think that's one of the charming aspects of it in this game. The track is pretty straightforward overall. It's a faithful recreation in terms of what the terrain looks like. I do like the little off-road sections near the end when we're driving through the dirt, kind of like the mud. It looks much better compared to Sunset Wild's mud, and it's just a much more fun track to play on than the original because of the new mechanics that are in Mario Kart 8. I think they really just hit it home with this one. Toad's Turnpike is up here as well, solely because of the anti-gravity walls at the beginning and the end. I think it really just adds a unique aspect to the track that wasn't there in the original, and obviously having glider ramps makes this track much more fun with the glider cars, because you can take those cars and you can glide over kind of like that top section, and I think that's really, really fun. You know, being able to see other parts of the track as you're driving through, instead of it being like, I'm staring at something new for the first lap until you turn around again. You get to see a section you just drove over if you manage to hit that glider ramp in the perfect spot. Toad's Turnpike, a really fun track in Mario Kart 64, and they really did a really good job of it in Mario Kart 8. Next is Yoshi's Circuit, and boy, this track looks stunning in Mario Kart 8, especially compared to the GameCube version of it. Have you seen it? Yoshi looks like naked in it, and they really brought this track to life in Mario Kart 8. And I think that's what is a part of the unique charm of Yoshi's Circuit. Obviously, it's in the shape of Yoshi, which is really funny, but it also just looks so much more spectacular compared to the GameCube version, and that's why it's up here. Next up is GCNDK Mountain. And again, it's right here in the 7 out of 10 section because it's just a solid remake of an iconic Mario Kart track. There's nothing really too crazy about it. They didn't do a disservice to it. They didn't huge glow it up. It's just pretty solid, and I think that's why it stays right here in the 7 out of 10 section. Next up is 3DS Music Park, and I think Nintendo just kind of nailed it with this one. It looks so much better than it did in Mario Kart 7, almost because of the higher graphical capabilities that we have on the Nintendo Switch. But, you know, it's just a pretty straightforward recreation of the track, and it just looks really good, and that's really it to Music Park. Next is DS Tick-Tock Clock, and in retrospect, I might put this one higher, probably, but I think I'm going to leave it here in the 7 out of 10, just because it's just straightforward. In terms of the track layout, pretty much the same as the DS version, but they've really improved what the track has looked like, and that's really where it shines, is how the track looks. In the DS version, it was very bland and boring, but they've added so much detail to the ground and walls that Tick-Tock Clock just looks like a much more vibrant track in this game. Next is Dry Dry Desert, and I think what really makes this one stay up here at 7 out of 10 is because of the water section, really. At the end, they have like the little boost that you can jump out of the water with, and I think it's a really fun and unique part that wasn't really captured in the original. They've done a very good job with this track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but it's still just a pretty straightforward recreation. You know, it's sandy, you have the sinkhole. Other than that, it's not too much different from the GameCube version, and that's why it's here in 7 out of 10. Next is GC and Sherbet Land, and with the advanced fog, lighting, and like shadows we have on the Nintendo Switch, this track looks beautiful. And I think anti-gravity being this game makes this track so much better with those underwater sections, and we didn't have that aspect in the GameCube version, and I think Nintendo just did a really good job of making this a faithful recreation. Next is 3DS DK Jungle, and I mean, it's a fun track. It looks really good. The only change they made was just making the temple section anti-gravity, and that's about it. And I think that's why it's just up here in 7 out of 10. All around, just a really solid track. They made it a little bit better with that anti-gravity, and I don't think it needs to be any higher than this. Next is GBA Snowland. Again, another Super Circuit track that is just brought to life by the advanced capabilities of the Nintendo Switch. They gave this track so much more of a unique charm than it had in Super Circuit, with the penguins, with the ramps. It just looks so beautiful, and I think they really knocked it out of the park with this Super Circuit track. Waluigi Pinball is next, and it's Waluigi Pinball. It's a very iconic track and a very fun track to play on, and I think Nintendo did a very good job of bringing this one back in Mario Kart 8. Yes, I know it was in Mario Kart 7, but you can't pass up an opportunity to put one of the best Mario Kart tracks in your DLC for your best Mario Kart game, and I think they just did a really good job of nailing all the lighting and all the different aspects of Waluigi Pinball in this game. Next is 3DS Neo Bowser City, and it's pretty much the same as it was in Mario Kart 7. The rain makes the track a little bit more slick, which is pretty fun to drive on. And the only thing they really did was they made the ending section anti-gravity just to give it a little bit more of a unique aspect, especially when you're playing multiplayer. Other than that, it doesn't change too much, and it's a pretty faithful recreation. Now we're into the high tier territory. We're into the 8 through 10s. And kicking us off in the 8 out of 10s is DK Summit. And man, I love this track. It is so much fun to play on. And with them bringing back zippers in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe because they brought the Wii tracks back, man, just that same feeling of racing down DK Summit is brought back to life in the Nintendo Switch Mario Kart. And oh boy, they just did such a good job, and I like how they finally changed the statue on the top of the summit to DK instead of Mario, because, you know, it is DK's summit, not Mario's. So they finally did that, makes it look so much better. Double cut is still possible, which is really funny. They just did a really good job with this track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You'd think we'd be done with the GBA tracks, but no, next up is Cheese Land. And Cheese Land, I think, is one of the best tracks I've ever played on in all of Mario Kart. It is so creative, it's so fun, it is a challenging track that I would say is definitely not for the faint of heart. It challenges your ability to navigate a course. There's so many different bumps in the road. It's just an overall really fun track, and Nintendo really nailed it with this remake. When Wii Daisy Circuit came to the Booster Course Pass, that blew me away. In my first look at it, I was appalled at how beautiful it looked. Despite the fact it's in the Booster Course Pass, it looks amazing, and that's why it's up here at that 8 out of 10 score. It's just a faithful remake to the Wii version, and it looks stunning. The sunset and lighting, the shadows, everything about it. It is just so pure, and it's a beautiful track to race on once again. Next on our 8 out of 10 tier is SNES Donut Plains 3. This is honestly probably one of the best SNES recreated tracks I've ever played. Nintendo really knocked it out of the park with this one for sure. I don't think I've seen any recreated track like this before. Mario Kart 8, it's stunning, honestly. They really took the creative liberties, I guess you could say, to the highest extreme with this track, and it really shines in it for sure. The little details in the graphics, the details in the track itself, truly just bring this track to life and make it so much better compared to the Super Mario Kart version. Next is DS Wario Stadium, and this is another retro track that really shines because of anti-gravity. There's a whole section right at the end where it's in anti-gravity, and it really makes that part of the track feel so much more diverse from the rest of it. The track is a little bit more condensed than the original, but I think that's what makes it so much more fun, is that it's less open, and all of your jumps, all of your turns have to be so much more tight, and it's a much more technical track than it was in Mario Kart DS, and then the water section at the end is just really fun and really unique compared to the original as well. We're still not done with the GBA tracks. We have Boo Lake next, and this is by far probably one of the best GBA tracks that have been recreated. It was so bland and boring in the original. Again, because of the flat graphics that they had to have on the Game Boy Advance, they didn't have much to work with. So again, coming into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, they really just let their creative team shine with this one, or whatever team they used to make the tracks again. They really added a lot more life to this track. It's called Boo Lake. You didn't drive into a lake in the original, and they made sure that you could do that with this version, and they did a really good job with it. Even though it's in the Booster Course Pass, it still looks amazing. Similar story to our next track, GCN Waluigi Stadium. Now, it's not quite the same as Boo Lake, where, it's like they kind of had to change the whole track, but what is similar is the fact that it still looks stunning, even though it's in the Booster Course Pass. The mud graphics, oof, it's so clean. It looks like you're actually driving through like a BMX arena in this game, and all the little aspects of it are just so much better compared to the Double Dash version and the Wii version as well. It just feels so much more alive in Mario Kart 8 compared to its previous installments. We're finally at the end of our GBA tracks with Ribbon Road, and just like Boo Lake, they didn't have much to work with in the original console, so they really had to make this one feel amazing, and they sure did that. The wavy roads, it is called Ribbon Road, so why would the roads not be wavy? Amazing. There's so much more color and so much more life in the track now. And if you haven't seen the world record for this track on 150 and 200cc, it's so technically advanced, and I think that's what makes this track really interesting. All these tracks, you can play them casually, but if you start to get really good at the game, that's where a lot of these retro tracks start to shine, is in their technicality and the precision it takes to get through these tracks quickly. And I just think Ribbon Road is one of those tracks, without a doubt. And our final track in our 8 out of 10 tier is SNES Rainbow Road. It's stunning, it plays well, it is probably one of the best Rainbow Roads, I would say. The original is definitely, I'd probably say the worst Rainbow Road, but specifically this recreation of it is one of the best Rainbow Roads. Wavy roads add so much character to this track, and then the Rainbow Thwomps, it just looks cool, it plays cool, and it's just a super hectic track. I've done this one with just mushrooms only, and on 200cc, and it's nuts. It's so much fun. This track is just so chaotic, and I think that's just a part of the inherent charm of it. Moving up to our 9 out of 10 tier, we have Piranha Plant Pipeway. And I'm telling you, if this track was in Mario Kart 8 first and not in Mario Kart 7, easily a top 5 track for sure. The anti-gravity section just adds so much to the underwater editing section that the 3DS version just didn't have that, and it just makes the track feel so much more like you're in an underwater sewage pipeway because of just like what it looks like underneath the water. It's so good, it's so clean. Piranha Plant Pipeway is also just a very fun track to play, and what they did with it coming from Mario Kart 7, they just nailed it with this one for sure. Moo Meadows is our next track with a score of 9, and really, it is to the T, pretty much a perfect recreation of Moo Meadows from Mario Kart Wii. I don't think there is a single flaw in this track, but you'll see why it's not rated 10 out of 10, because the 10 out of 10 tracks truly are some of the greatest retro tracks, but I don't know, something about it just holds me a little bit back from giving it that 10 out of 10, but other than that, Moo Meadows is one of the greatest retro tracks in Mario Kart 8. Next is SNES Bowser Castle 3, and this one is amazing, and that's why it's here in 9 out of 10. They really said, flat ground, what's that? This track is amazing. I don't know what their creative team was on when they were designing this remake, but they went crazy with it, and it looks good too. The track is so fun and unique to play on. There's so many more obstacles and so many more just unique parts of the track than there were compared to the original, and again, it just looks amazing, even though it's in the Booster Course Pass. And our final retro track with a score of 9 is Wario's Gold Mine. Very similar reasons to Moo Meadows. It is a very faithful recreation of the track, and once again, it's another retro track that shines because of anti-gravity. It adds so much to the mine section, and the mine carts, you can spin on them, giving you that little speed boost. It just makes the whole thing so much more fun to drive on, and it just creates a more unique experience, I would say, and it's just super fun and a really great remake of this iconic Mario Kart Wii track. And last but not least, we've reached the end of this tier list, the 10 out of 10s. The first one is Grumble Volcano. Grumble Volcano is another Mario Kart Wii track, but they just nailed it with this one. I don't know what it is, but Grumble Volcano is such an incredible retro track in Mario Kart 8. It could be the graphics, it could just be the fact that it just plays super well. Like, they didn't change much about the track, besides giving a glider ramp in the middle of the moving platform section. It just looks so stunning, and I think that's why it's up here. It looks stunning, it plays pretty much exactly the same as the original, and it was already a really great track in Mario Kart Wii. It is one of the best Mario Kart 8 retro tracks, if not just one of the best Mario Kart 8 tracks, period. We're now at our second to last 10 out of 10 track, Wii Rainbow Road. This is my personal favorite track. It is one I've had the most fun racing on, and I still have fun on it in Mario Kart 8. It looks beautiful. The cover of the original song sounds amazing. It is just a perfect remake of this amazing Mario Kart track. And finally, the best retro track course in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, N64 Rainbow Road. Oh my gosh, this track is so much fun. It's so hectic. It is beautiful. It is one of the best Mario Kart tracks, period. Like, even outside of this retro track tier list and outside of the Mario Kart 64 tier list, it's just, period, one of the best Mario Kart tracks in Mario Kart history. It plays well, it's beautiful, the music, it just fills your soul. I have no words for this track, honestly. Like, I'm trying to describe what makes it so beautiful, but I have no words. That's how great this track is. There are so many just beautiful, charming aspects of it. I can't even put it into words, and that is why N64 Rainbow Road gets the #1 spot on our Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Retro Track tier list. And with that, that is going to do it for this video. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more awesome Nintendo content just like this. If you have different ideas, leave them in the comments below. I want to hear what you guys think about the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Retro Tracks. I love hearing what you guys have to say. If you thought I made a bad pick, let me know about that in the comments down below as well. With that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Peace out.